Alright, welcome back guys. In the last video we saw how we can keep a user logged in when the page is refreshed, and in this video we're going to see how to work with refresh tokens. So the way that we work with refresh tokens, if I open up my backend and then this httpOnly auth and then my urls.py, so we have this endpoint for getting a new access token when we hit this. So we pass our refresh token to this, and then we get back a new access token. So that's the way that it works when we're using refresh tokens. Although there's also other things you can do with refresh tokens as well. And that's stuff I'm also going to show how to do in this video. So right here I have open the simple JWT documentation. Then if you go under the settings, you can see different settings that you can set here. And then you would put these under this simple JWT setting, which is something that we also have in our project in our settings.py. If we go down, so right over here, we already defined some of these settings, but there's other ones that we can use as well. So let's take a look at some of these. So there's this refresh token lifetime that we made use of, so that way our refresh token expires after a day. Then we also have some other handy things like rotate refresh tokens. So right here we have a description of that. So when we set this to true, then if the refresh token is submitted to the token refresh view, then we get back a new refresh token along with the new access token. So this is kind of nice. That way you can get a brand new refresh token. Then these new refresh tokens will have a renewed expiration time, which is determined by adding the time delta refresh token lifetime, which is something that we set. And then if the blacklist app is in use and the blacklist after rotation setting is set to true, which is this one right here, then refresh tokens submitted to the refresh token view will be added to the blacklist. And then anything that's added to the blacklist will no longer be valid, because when we send something off, we're going to have our backend check whether this token is in our blacklist. So this blacklist is a way that you can make your tokens invalid, because remember, all of our tokens have expiration times and then you have to wait for the expiration to finish before it becomes invalid. But this blacklist is a way to make these tokens invalid sooner. And then in order to use the blacklist app, you just have to put this inside of your installed app setting. And then that way you can make it so that when you make a request to the refresh endpoint and get back a new refresh token and new access token, if this is set to true, then you also have your old refresh token put into the blacklist. So that way it becomes invalid. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate in this video. So first off, I want to copy this right here and put inside of my installed apps. That way we can have the blacklist app. So I'm going to go into my settings, find my installed apps settings, so right over here, and maybe say below this core settings, I can put this blacklist app in here, then save that. And then let's also put in these settings here. So rotate refresh tokens. So I want to rotate my refresh tokens. So I'm going to go to my simple JWT setting. And then looks like we already have this rotate refresh token setting. And right now it's set to false, which by default it is set to false. So I'm just going to set it to true since we already have it here. So we have that setting. And then there's also blacklist after rotation, which is another one I want to set. So right below this, I'm going to put in this setting and then also set that to true. So this setting here, we need to have this one set to true in order to have this one actually work. So that's all we really need in terms of the logic, and then our simple JWT package is going to handle the rest for us. So it's nice and easy to add in this functionality. So now let's go ahead and implement this logic in our front end. So the way I'm going to have this work in my front end to demonstrate the rotating of these refresh tokens is I'm just going to have on my layout.js, I'm going to have a dispatch like I have with the check auth status. And right before this one, I'm going to have one to request the refresh token endpoint. That way we get back a new refresh and access token. And then after that, we're going to check whether this right here, if our access token is valid. And then another way that we can do this is we can have an action creator, which is going to make that request to that refresh endpoint so that we get back a new refresh and access token. And then after that dispatches a success, then we dispatch this inside of that action creator. So that's another way that we can do this. That way, if the refresh request fails, then we don't dispatch this right here. So that way we don't make an unnecessary API request. So that's probably the way I'm going to implement this. So first off, I'm going to open up my pages API, and then inside of my account folder, I'm going to make a brand new file. And I'm going to call this refresh.js. So that way when we hit API/account/refresh, then we're going to hit this endpoint here, which is going to make a request to our Django backend API. And then if all is good, we're going to get back a new access refresh token. We're going to set that inside of our httpOnly cookies. So we're going to update the access and refresh token values that are inside of there. And then those are going to be the values that we use from there on. So let's get started with this implementation. So I'm going to close that side window, zoom in a little more, and I'm going to do an export default async request response. And then this right here, I'm just going to make it a GET request. And then if everything's in order, we're just going to send back to our Next.js client a status of 200. So here I'm going to have if request.method is equal to get. Then we're going to proceed, otherwise we're going to send back our error response. So first I'm going to do that response.setHeader with allow. And then what I want to allow is get requests. And then I'm going to return a response with a status of 405, just like we've been seeing before. Pass back some JSON. And then here I'm going to have an error. And then this error is just going to say, actually I need my backticks. It's going to say method request dot method not allowed. And then if we do have a get request, then we're going to proceed with this. So first thing I'm going to do is parse my cookies. So I'm going to have const cookies, which is going to be my variable, just like we've been seeing before, where I do a cookie.parse, and I have to make sure I bring in this cookie package. So I'm going to import cookie from cookie. And then what I want to parse is request.headers.cookie. And then if we have no cookies, then I'm just going to parse this empty string, so that way this will end up being undefined. And then another thing you can also do is just have an or here. That's another approach you can use. And then that way, if this doesn't exist, you'll also have the empty string. I'm just going to use this notation here because that's what I've been using, but there's different approaches to do the same thing. And now the thing that is expected of our refresh endpoint is for it to be a post request where we pass our refresh token to it. So I need to grab the refresh token from these parsed cookies. So I'm going to do const refresh is equal to cookies.refresh. So that's the value I'm grabbing, but this might not exist. So again, you can use this or notation and then do something like false like we've been doing. But because I've been using this notation, I'll stick with this. And then after that, I'm going to check if refresh is equal to false. Then we're going to return an error response. So I'm going to return a response with a status of 401. And then I'm going to pass back some JSON with an error. And it's going to say user unauthorized to make this request. All right, and then if we don't hit this check, then we're going to proceed with the rest of this endpoint. So I'm going to grab this refresh token that I have, and I'm going to turn it into JSON data. So I'm going to do const body is json.stringify. I'm going to stringify my refresh token. And then my simple JWT endpoint expects this to be called refresh, so I can just have it like this. So this is the equivalent of me doing this, but I can just have it with this syntax here. And then I'm going to have my try catch. And then in my try, I'm going to make my API request to my Django backend endpoint. So I'm going to do const API response, which is going to be await fetch. Then I'm going to have my backticks where I have API URL, which is something I have to bring in here. So I'm going to import API URL, which is coming from up 3 directories, and then config and index. And then the endpoint I'll be hitting, if we take a look, so inside of my httpOnly auth, which is my project folder, urls.py, we're going to be hitting API/token/refresh/ with that trailing slash, because that's how we defined it here. So I'm going to close up that side window, and then I'm going to paste this in here. So that's going to be our endpoint. This is going to be a post request. So I'm going to have the method be post. I'm going to have some headers. Then as for my headers, I'm going to have an accept header, which is going to be application JSON. And then I'm also going to have a content type because I'm going to be passing this refresh token along, and it's going to be JSON data. And then finally, I'm going to have my body, which is going to be this right here. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is check whether this was successful. So this endpoint is successful when I get a 200 OK response. So I can check if API response.status is 200, then this was successful. Otherwise, it wasn't successful. And then if it's successful, what I'm going to do is I'm going to update my access and refresh tokens inside of my httpOnly cookie. So another thing I also have to do is grab that data that I get back. So I'm going to do const data is equal to API response.json, and I also have to make sure I have the await here. And then from this data, I can grab the access and refresh token and then update my httpOnly cookies. So to update those cookies, I can do a response.setHeader. And then set cookie. So that's going to be my header, where then I have my array with my cookie.serialize. And then I'm going to serialize my access token, which is going to be updated to data.access. So that's what I'm getting back from the endpoint. And also to make sure I have a comma here. And then I'm going to have my options So I'm going to have between these curly braces the HTTP only setting, which is going to be true. I'm going to have the secure setting, which is going to be my process.env.node environment doesn't equal development like we saw before. I'm going to have the max age property, which is going to be 60 times 30, because remember our access tokens will expire after 30 minutes. And I'm going to have the same site property, which is going to be strict. And then again, that's just to mitigate CSRF. And then for the path, I'm going to have /API/. And then I'm also going to do the cookie.serialize for my refresh token. So I'm just going to copy this right here. I'm going to have a comma. And then right below, I'm going to do a cookie.serialize, this time for the refresh. And then that's what I'm going to grab from data.refresh. Because now with the endpoint, with the settings that we added, so once again, that is the rotate refresh tokens and the blacklist after rotation. So these things make it so that I will get a new refresh token when I make this request. So that way I can now grab this, update my refresh token, and now this will be 60 times 60 times 24, so that it's 1 day. Because again, that's what we set for the lifetime. And now that we have this, the next step is going to be to send back a response. So I'm going to return a response with the status of 200 to mirror what our Django backend API sent back. I'm going to pass back some JSON data, and then I'm just going to have some success object that says refresh request successful. And then in the case where we hit this else, then I'm going to have a status that matches what my Django backend API sent back. So I'm going to do API response.status. I'm going to have an error. And then this will just say something like failed to fulfill refresh request. And then if we hit the catch, then I'm going to hard code this status code, and I'm going to set it to 500. And then I'll just say something like something went wrong when trying to fulfill refresh request. All right, so now we have our Next.js API endpoint in place. So now when we hit this, we're going to parse our cookies. We're going to grab our refresh token. If we have a refresh token, then we're going to put it into JSON data. We're going to make our request to our Django backend API, which is going to be to that refresh request. And then we're going to get back a new refresh and access token. And then the old refresh token is going to be invalid because it's going to be submitted to our token blacklist. And then we're going to send this as a post request, get back our new refresh access token. So that way we can update our HTTP only cookies to be the new access and refresh tokens. And then we're going to send back to our Next.js client a status of 200 with some success message, which we're not really going to utilize, but just setting that here anyway. So now that we have this, the next thing I'm going to do is make an action creator, which is going to hit this endpoint. It's going to open up that side window, open up my actions folder, open up the types and auth.js, since this is where I'm going to be working. I'm going to close this refresh since I don't need that anymore. And then I'm going to make 2 new dispatch types. So below my authenticated success and fail, I'm just going to copy both of these, paste them below here, highlight this authenticated part, do a command D 3 times, and I'm going to set this to be a refresh. So that way I have a refresh success and a refresh fail. And now that I have those, I'm going to save, go into this auth.js inside of my actions folder. And then right below here, I'm going to bring in these 2 dispatch types. And then I'm going to go below my check auth status. I'm going to make a brand new action creator, which I'm going to call request refresh. And then as for the parameters, we're not going to have any parameters. It's going to be an asynchronous dispatch. And also have to make sure I do a const here. And then I'm going to have my try catch, where I'm going to make my API request to my Next.js API. I'm going to have const response as await fetch, and then the endpoint's going to be /API/account/refresh, along with some settings. And then it's going to be this endpoint because I have /API/account/refresh on my Next.js API. And then again, we expected this to be a GET request, so I'm going to have my method as GET. I'm going to have my headers, where I'm just going to have an accept header, and I have to make sure I do it like so. So accept application JSON, and then I'm not going to have any kind of body, as this is a GET request that we're making. And then I'm going to check if my response.status is equal to 200. And if that's the case, then I'm going to dispatch my success type. So I'm going to have a type of refresh success, Otherwise, I'm going to have my dispatch for the fail case. And I'm going to have the same thing inside of the catch. So there we are. So now we have to make sure that we handle these. And then also another thing, I want to dispatch this right here when we're successful. So that's another thing I'm going to do. So right below this, I'm going to dispatch also. So the check auth status is what I want to dispatch. So there we are. And that's going to be whenever we get a 200 OK from this response. Otherwise, we're not going to dispatch this. So I'm going to open up that side window, go into my reducers folder, open up the auth.js, and let's bring in these two dispatch types. So refresh success and refresh fail. And let's make two cases to handle these dispatch types now. So right below my authenticated fail, I'm going to go ahead and handle these. So I'm going to have the case for refresh success. And this is just going to return spread operator on state. So it's not going to change any of this state if we're successful. And then I'm going to have my refresh fail. So case for refresh fail. And then I'm just going to copy this so I don't get that strange autofill happening. And then if we fail to refresh, I'm going to set is authenticated to be false. And I'm also going to set user to be null. So there we are. We have our two cases now handled. So the next thing I'm going to do is go into my layout.js. And then instead of dispatching this check auth status, instead I'm going to dispatch that request refresh endpoint that we made. Because once again, when we hit this right here, if it's successful, we're going to dispatch a refresh success. And then we're going to dispatch that check auth status. So I'm going to, instead of bringing this in now, I'm going to bring in my request refresh. And then that's what I'm going to dispatch here instead. So that way we hit this. If it's successful, we get a new refresh and access token, we check our auth status, and then from there, we're good to go. Now, there's different ways to implement this. So another thing you could do is you could even just dispatch the check auth status here. And then if everything's okay with that, then you don't dispatch this. Maybe you dispatch this on very specific pages. But with those kinds of details, I'm not too concerned in this application. I just want to demonstrate how these things work. So I'm just going to have it like this, where whenever we go on a different page, then we hit this right here so that we get a new refresh and access token. And then after that, we check the auth status. Although I just want to point out that you probably wouldn't do something like this in a real application. You probably want to hit this kind of endpoint only on very important pages. Let's say if you had some kind of checkout page, you'd maybe want to make this request for a new refresh and access token. But again, I just want to show how you work with these different endpoints. So in terms of how you'd use this in a real application is really up to you. But now that we have this logic implemented, let's now see it in action and make sure that everything now works. So I'm going to do a little refresh. Then I'm going to open up my application right here. I'm just going to remove whatever cookies are in here. And now let's go ahead and log in. I'm going to log in with my John Doe account. And it looks like I'm getting an issue, so let's take a look. And let's see. So I probably have to migrate these changes to my database, so let me do that. I'm going to do a manage.py, make migrations, so no changes there. And then I'm going to do the migrate, because now I have that blacklist token app. So now I'm going to migrate that, rerun my server, and now everything should be in order. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to try to log in again. So there we are. Now we're logged in. And I also see my access and refresh token here. So we can take a look at this value and make note of it. So this one ends with 2GA. This one ends with UKW. So if we go to another page, like our home page, we see that it got updated. So our access token got updated, and also this one got updated. We see that it's different. And then if we check out our Redux dispatches here, we can see that when we went on a new page, we did the refresh success, the authenticated success, load user success. So we redispatched all of these, and then we can check out our state. It's still looking like this. And then again, you might not want to implement things where it's like once you go on every page, you do this, just because then on every single page, you'd have to make a request for the refresh endpoint, then for the verify endpoint, and then for retrieving the user endpoint. But again, this is just to demonstrate how you work with these values. And then if I go back to the dashboard, then these values should be updated again. So now we see that the refresh and access token are different. So we can see that this is working. One final little test that we can even do is we can open up Postman, and then we can try to use this refresh token and then see if the blacklist is working. So I'm going to copy this refresh token. I'm going to open up Postman. And then now that I have Postman open, I'm going to open up a new tab here. I'm going to make a post request. It's going to be to localhost 8000 /API /token /refresh /. I'm going to have my content type of application JSON. I'm going to pass some raw data to this. I'm going to have my refresh. And I'm going to paste in my refresh token I have right now. So this one should be valid. So I'm not going to send this request off right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go on a different page. So that way this refresh token changes. So now our old one should be added to the blacklist, which means that if I send off this request right now, there we go. Token is blacklisted, token not valid. So that now confirms that everything is in order with our tokens rotating and with our blacklisting. So now whenever we go to a different page, this refresh token that we have becomes invalid. So this probably isn't ideal because then we're going to have a lot of refresh tokens added inside of our token blacklist, which can be quite resource demanding, but at least now you know how you can work with this. So that was the whole goal of this video right here. So there we are. That's everything I wanted to cover in this video. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't yet, please hit that like button. It goes a long way to help a channel like mine grow and get recognized so others can benefit from these videos I release as well. And also I have links in the description that you can check out. I have one for an e-commerce course that you can check out if you're interested in learning to develop an application like that. I also have a link for joining my Web Development Kings Facebook group. That way if you want to ask me something personally, then you can from there. And then I will happily help you out. It doesn't cost you anything, so if you're scratching your head about something, then you can go right ahead and ask me to help you out. And then the only questions I probably won't answer are if you want me to help you build some kind of personal project, as it's very time consuming and I don't quite have the time for that sort of thing. You can also post something in the group itself, that way other developers can help you out with something as well. The group is all about growing your expertise as a developer, so if you're interested in that, then go ahead and click that link in the description and join the family. Also, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button, turn on those notification bells, that way you don't miss out when I release a new video, and I will see you in the next one.